We the people, and when in the course of human events. Those phrases sound familiar? I hope so. This is Alan with Quarter Horse Arms, and in this podcast I want to talk about a concept related to the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and, in a couple cases, maybe how it's been abused. Before I get too far into this, the idea for the podcast came from a student of mine after we had a conversation, and I promised I'd give her a shout out. So thank you, Sabrina, for the excellent conversation and the idea for this podcast. Okay, so if I start with the Constitution... back up. Let me start with the Declaration of Independence, mostly because it happened first. So in 1776, they start out with when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, etc., etc., and those rights include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Kind of a pretty advanced concept in 1776. So we're 250 years back. And what they're saying is, get rid of the political bans. They're going, we're being abused by England, or we're being oppressed, or we've grown up, and we don't need to be a series of colonies that belong to another country. We're big enough, bad enough, and ready to be out on our own. So we're saying we're done. We're ready to move on and move up in the world. And so we follow 13 years later to 1789. And we kick off with, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States, etc., etc. Okay. You can read all or the entire documents if you want to, but the concepts that they're talking about in those preambles fall under what are called social contracts. And what do we mean by a social contract? Well, it's where the members of a population or people cooperate for social benefits. So we form a government to help everybody out. And, one way or another, we give up some of our personal freedoms and gain protection by the government. So what are we talking about with these protections? Laws, civil rights. The other thing that it describes is a moral imperative. And that moral imperative is you're supposed to overthrow the government if it's not doing what you need it to do. So we have expectations and rules and values that we want our government to live up to, and they have a whole series of responsibilities that we as a people have to live up to for that government. And so within those documents, they define, the duties and responsibilities. The subunits, meaning the states, can develop their own laws. And essentially it says government has the power to protect the rights, but people can change their government if it fails to protect their rights. So what were we talking about? Revolution again. Am I talking about January 6th? Hell no. That's a whole different animal. What I am talking about, though, is within those documents, these two key documents to the formation of our country and our government, is the responsibilities the government has for us and the responsibilities we have to our government. So does it sound kind of weird and unique? Yeah, it does. Do other countries have stuff like this? Sure. And if you do a little bit of research, you'll find, I think it's like social contracts, or the whole concept of that goes back to, I think, the mid-1600s. And one of the things that I wanted to get into, and I'm just going to do this very briefly, which is some governments or some leaders of governments kind of use this whole concept against the people, where they step in and everything sounds really good, but then they do things that don't help the people, in fact, harm them. And the other thing that kind of goes hand in hand with this is, well, if we have a moral imperative to overthrow the government, some of these abusers of power find ways to prevent that from happening. Case in point, Nazi Germany. Hitler comes into power. Well, not such a nice guy. Comes into power, everything's looking good, but what's one of the first things he does to prevent his government from being overthrown? Well, he takes the guns away. Well, it prevents people from going out and having a revolution. And speaking of revolutions, let's take a look at the former Soviet Union. Same thing. Communist government comes into power, and let's start with when Stalin takes over. He was not a nice guy either. He probably killed at least as many people, if not more, than what Hitler killed. So to prevent the people from uprising against him, take away the guns. And now you're going, Alan, have you completely gotten deranged? Am I talking about gun control? No. What I am talking about is the fact that the social contracts, meaning things like the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, work, but it's a two-way street. The population has to be willing to support the government, while at the same time the government has to be willing to work for the betterment of the people. So, sum and substance, people that abuse the powers granted to them, meaning government leaders that abuse the powers, can take advantage of people under the guise of this social contract. I'm going to make things better for you. And then sneak things in and change things to the point where they've gone from, say, a popularly elected government to a dictatorship. Am I worried about that happening in the United States? No. I think we're a little too big and a little too resilient for something like that to happen. However, are there places in the world that are at risk? Yeah. There's a large number of countries where 100 well-armed people represent a significant threat to the government. Am I talking about things, some of the countries in Africa? Yeah, I am. But, very recently we've had the same kind of thing happen in South America with a couple countries there. Somebody's not happy, so they overthrow the government. Now, in some cases, are you overthrowing the government and putting a better one in place? Yeah. But a lot of times, they're not. They're stepping in and saying all the right things, but that's really not their intent. So to go back to this and kind of end it, I know I've sounded like I was rambling, but as a people, we created the government. And the government has responsibilities to us as a people. And it is our responsibility to get rid of the government if it's not meeting our needs. Now, does that require a revolution? Not so much. I mean, it can. Revolutions tend to be bloody. Can we alter the government fairly quickly? Yeah, I think so. We usually call them elections, but that's a whole different story. So, sorry for this wandering out about the concept of social contract, but it's an important concept because it defines who we are as a country. And again, I want to say thank you to Sabrina. I look forward to hearing any questions or comments. Feel free to text or call 919-808-6480. You can email info@quarterhorsearms.com. And the website's quarterhorsearms.com. This is Alan with Quarter Horse Arms and in Snow Camp, North Carolina. And you guys be safe out there.